But first to the analysis of Shields and Brooks. That's syndicated columnist Mark Shields and New York Times columnist David Brooks. It's a bit like Groundhog's Day here. We're going to cover some topics you probably have never thought of before. Sexual misconduct and taxes. But, you know, there are developments after more and more developments of both of these stories, and we'll get to some more stuff too. But this week we saw new women coming out and alleging sexual misconduct by Roy Moore, some of them underage. And then we had Al Franken's behavior in 2006, including a disturbing photograph that nobody can deny. They are not parallel incidents, but the responses have been very different.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's inevitable, death, taxes, and harassment these days. You know, it seems to me the one failure that we're seeing among a lot of people is how partisan the reaction would be, starting with the president. Sexual harassment is not a Republican thing or it's not a Democratic thing, it's just a thing. And it's amazing how many people are reacting, depending on which party the person is in, the guy's in, how their reaction is. I personally, overall, still think this is a good thing. Our standards are raising. People who have done misconduct are being punished. And we're cleaning out the swamp, as they were supposed to say. Alongside that, I think it's important to make some distinctions among the different levels of sin here. It seems to me what Harvey Weinstein did and what Roy Moore did as the highest level of vileness and should be career enders. Then there are other levels of sin which probably should be career enders, setting a predatory environment. You know, whether it's Bill Clinton or the guy, some of the journalists who have been involved. And then I would put Al Franken so far in a different category, frankly. What he did was callous and narcissistic and insensitive and just pathetic. But if it's one time and if he can apologize and then do real penance, my first instinct is that it should not be a career ender for him.
Well, Mark, oftentimes it's not one time. Oftentimes we start to reveal a pattern of behavior that might be in the background as more people feel empowered to speak up.
No, and that's what we've found so far in these instances. It's not usually a single solitary event. But I think David makes a very persuasive point about what we have with Roy Moore, quite frankly, the reaction in the opening news summary when the governor, Kay of Alabama, says she has no reason not to believe the women, but she's still going to vote for Roy Moore. Now, I mean, there's a disconnect there, and the only explanation can be just blind, unyielding, total partisanship. And I don't care. And let's be very blunt about it. I mean, there were feminists who rallied to Bill Clinton's support during his long, complicated lying to the American people about a disproportionate power relationship that he had with a 21-year-old intern, an adulterous behavior, who rallied to his support because Bill Clinton was pro-choice on abortion. There are those who now are ready to skewer Roy Moore, and I'm not going to deny that he needs skewering for ideological reasons and because he's proved he's anti-woman by his political positions. But if we're just talking about behavior here and not blind partisanship, I don't think that Al Franken's behavior rises to the level of eviction from the Senate or anything of the sort. I mean, that is not. But for a party that's based an awful lot of its appeal on identity politics, that we are the women's party, that we believe in women's rights, that we respect women, and the Republicans don't. This is a body blow. And Al Franken has been a major fundraiser for Democrats, and he's been an aggressive inquisitor on committees and representing the Democrats. So I mean, I think it is serious. I don't know where it's going to stop, but I think in the final analysis we have to come to grips. It is power, and it's been men exercising power, generally speaking, with almost overwhelmingly speaking, and the women in the position of supplicant, without the resources, without the means of protesting or just bringing to justice these people.
If I could just add one thing on the Missouri, first on the Clinton thing, I think we just have to look back and say the people who ignored the testimony of Kathleen Willey and Juanita Broderick helped set the stage for this. And the Democrats who defended Clinton in those cases, they helped set the atmosphere for what we're seeing and for the behavior that Harvey Weinstein and the rest could get away with. The second thing to be said is there's a word for what defenders of Roy Moore are doing, the people who say they would vote for him nonetheless. Well, two words. One word is idolatry and the other word is heresy. Because the people who are going to sacrifice morality for politics are making an idol out of politics. They're saying politics is higher than morality. And no honest person can possibly believe that. And if you're putting politics above personal morality, above the way we treat each other, above the nature of your own soul, you're just, you're making an idol out of it. And that is the ultimate in heresy. And to see, I saw a tweet from Franklin Graham, Billy Graham's son, defending Moore, you know, sort of, oh, they're all a bunch of hypocrites up there. It's just appalling. It's just, it's almost mind-boggling that people who, especially people who have been steeped in any faith, could make this kind of fundamental error, which is warned against again and again in the Bible, and to be heretics. They're heretics.
Then there's the injection that the president puts into this conversation, right? He on Capitol Hill, when he was there for some press conferences earlier in the week, he had several questions shouted to him about this, which he did not, he chose not to address. And then Sarah Sanders, as we saw earlier in the program, said that he does feel if, in fact, the evidence is true against Moore, that Moore should step aside. But at the same time, you know, while there has been kind of a consistent talking point for a while that the people of Alabama should decide the fate of Roy Moore, the president comes out with a tweet late last night about Al Franken. And in that tweet, it says, the Al Frankenstein picture is really bad, speaks 1,000 words. Does this at this point open him up to a line of criticism saying, well, if this is what you're going to say about this person that was accused of misconduct, what about the 15 or so women who've publicly come out against you?
Yeah, well, like I said, it's simple. Just treat everybody the same, regardless of party. It's not complicated. And so the president is open to hypocrisy 6 ways from Sunday on this particular issue. It seems to hold him back not.
Well, I guess I should not be surprised that somebody who found a friendly family podiatrist in 1968 to avoid the military draft and to not serve his country in Vietnam, and then went on to attack and disparage the heroic service of John McCain, who spent 5.5 years as a prisoner of war, and saw no inconsistency in that hypocrisy and indefensibility, morally about what he did. I shouldn't be surprised that he, facing charges, having pledged that he was going to sue these women who had accused him of sexual harassment, sexual molestation, and worse, and never having initiated any kind of action, never having responded to them, would go after Al Franken and duck the Roy Moore matter. I mean, why he'd want to? He just invites the replaying of the Access Hollywood tape and his own how-to manual on how to molest women, and how if you're rich and powerful, women are irresistible or indefensible to what you do. I mean, so I guess I shouldn't be surprised, but still, he does surprise me from time to time on his shamelessness. He's a shameless man.
Let me ask you if you are surprised about something else that's happened this week, which is the progress of the Republican tax plan. Do you think that what do you think happens in the Senate?
I'd say, first of all, I think that Paul Ryan, whom I've criticized, certainly did perform as Speaker. He got it through. He rallied his Republicans mostly to it. Just a couple of things about it. I've been going to Republican conventions since 1976. I've heard the party time and again solemnly pledge in its compact and covenant with the American people that we will support and fight for a balanced budget constitutional amendment. I hope that never appears again because they have proved that they don't care about that. All this tax cut is about, this tax thing, is cutting the corporate rate from 35% to 20%. That's all it is. Everything else is window dressing. And you know, there are other factors to it that are important that touch people's lives. And usually when there's a tax cut, there's some behavior that's required. For a charitable deduction, you have to make a donation to a charity. For child care credit, you have to have a child. And there has to be some credit. There is nothing required of these corporations. There is not a nickel they have to spend in investment. There's not a nickel they have to spend in retraining. There's not a nickel they have to spend in anything for their own workers. The idea that they're going to pass this on in increased wages goes back to John Galbraith's theory of economics, which is if you stuff enough oats into the horse, that eventually a little will pass through to the road and the sparrow will be fed. And I just find it absolutely mind-boggling. And the only other aspect to it that I found fascinating is the Republican Party that has stood for states' rights. And the states that have actually taxed themselves to improve their education and to improve their health care are going to be punished. It's been in the tax code since 1913 that was introduced. They're going to remove it.
So, David, that analogy of trickle-down economics, I've not heard
Still
before.
following the biology of that thing. No, I wish it was only a corporate tax cut, because I think there's a lot of good economic evidence that if you give corporations tax cuts, they have more cash on hand, they do invest, and that there's a fair bit of data on this. And so I wish it were that. And I think there are other good things in the bill. Capping the mortgage interest deduction is a good thing. I think maybe adjusting the state and local taxes is a good thing because 90% of the benefit goes to people making over $100,000 a year. The problem with it is, first, it explodes the deficit. Second, it's a raw piece of political exploitation, taking the tax code and benefiting our people at the expense of blue states. And we shouldn't turn the tax code into a spoil system. And third, it attacks the universities and the nonprofits in a way that I think is unconscionable. So I'm against it. But there are some good things in it. If they fell back to a corporate tax cut, which had sympathy in the Obama administration, it would be a little happier story.
All right, Mark Shields, David Brooks, thank you both.
Thank you. Think of the sparrow.